Prime Minister Stephen Harper's new Clean Air Act legislation got more negative attention this month as over 200 people demonstrated at Parliament Hill on November 4th. The group, comprised of friends and members of the Canadian Youth Climate Coalition, organized a demonstration in Ottawa to show they are not happy with the Prime Minister's approach to Canada's commitments to global warming and the Kyoto Protocols. The Youth Coalition says the Clean Air Act shows the battle against greenhouse gases is not a Canadian government priority. The coalition is taking to the streets in Ottawa to demand that we keep up our international obligations and prevent catastrophic climate chaos.
In the same way that Bush catered to his base in Texas in the oil industry there, the Harper government is catering to polluters across Canada, including the oil and gas industry in Alberta.
Climate change is the single biggest threat to survival of all species on this planet. Failure to act immediately to address climate change will have dire consequences, not just for future generations, but for all of us, for youth, for my children, and for all living things that rely on our fragile and precious ecosystem. And it is a fact we should underline that those who contribute the least to climate change are paying the highest price and its outcomes.
What we need to see from this government is basically an acknowledgement that we have to have the planet and the safe life to go before profits. Yes, it's important to have a healthy economy, but not at the exact expense of our environment and of our climate. Many studies have shown that the problem is not the policies and all the solutions that exist, because we know there are solutions. What we need is will. We need the political will to change. That's incredibly important. We need to change the way we've been thinking for the last 100 years, because obviously it's bringing us to basically the extension of one of the most fundamental things for our life, which is our climate. We can't afford to lose it, and nor can our children and the children of our children.
Kyoto now! 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 Kyoto now!
You say most of these countries are doing it through the international carbon trading system?
No, of the ones that are struggling,
right,
like Japan, the Netherlands,
right,
they are working on through the flexibility mechanisms, the international carbon trading. But many other countries have done it domestically. Like I said, the UK, Germany, France, Iceland, they have all reduced their emissions. It's not through the international trading they've done it. They've done it by reducing their own emissions.
So we could do it.
We absolutely could do it. Now Canada has waited much too long, and it becomes a more difficult task. But Canada is still reachable. It will mean using some of the flexibility mechanisms, using some the international carbon market, more than we would like to have seen, but we can still do it. Okay. So it's just a matter of deciding whether we still want to be a part of the global regime on climate change, or whether we want to extract ourselves. And right now, Canada is telling the world that we're taking ourselves out.
While Prime Minister Harper cannot ignore the fact global warming is progressing, it is clear that the Canadian Youth Climate Coalition and the Conservative Party do not agree on the government's current policy on how to deal with the problem and how Canada appears in the eyes of the world on global warming issues. A group of about 50 Ethiopian Canadians gathered November 2nd to demonstrate on Parliament Hill in Ottawa. Ethiopian Canadians used a loud public demonstration as a vehicle to coerce the Canadian government to continue to suspend budgetary support to the government of Prime Minister Meles Zenawi of Ethiopia until it respects human rights and releases all political prisoners. According to their internet website, members of the Kinigit political party organized the event to garner attention to the goal of ousting oppressive rule of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front Party that they accused of rigging a national election held May 15th last year. Even before the election was over, the regime claimed victory and launched a killing spree in November, murdering 193 democracy civilians. These electoral frauds were witnessed and confirmed by the European Union and Carter Center, who witnessed the election. Kinigit members say that it appears that the West is choosing an unacceptable status quo instead of using its leverage to advocate for basic civility, democracy, and human rights in Ethiopia. We only hope that the international community would not watch silently as this crime against our leaders and people. According to CBC News, 2 more people are dead in Ethiopia, reportedly from police gunfire in the 4th day of protests over the African country's disputed elections. Thursday's deaths come a day after police shot and killed at least 23 people and injured at least 150 others, say doctors. Government officials maintain Wednesday's death toll stands at 11 civilians and 1 police officer. The demonstrations center on elections in May that resulted in Prime Minister Zenawi, Ethiopian People's Revolution Democratic Front, taking nearly 2/3 of the seats in parliament. Opposition parties accuse the governing party of rigging those elections and say fraud, intimidation, and violence were rampant.
Originally, I'm from Ethiopia, and I lived in Canada here for the last 16 years. And what we are here today in front of Parliament Hill to give a message and to ask different kind of questions what's going on in Ethiopia about human rights violation and the existing government in Ethiopia, what they are doing towards the people there. And there is a prisoners of conscience, and what they do is politics in Ethiopian's government is like they see it as a crime, and politics is not a view of crime. So what we are here is today to give a message and to ask Canadian government. And last year, the 1st of November in Ethiopia and in Addis Ababa, there is a lot of massacre and people are killed, imprisoned, and lots of children lost their lives because of the government. This happens, there was an election done by the government with different opposition parties, and from those opposition parties, the first one is United Democratic Forces, UDF, and Kinigit, and the other different parties. They try to accomplish parliamentary elections, and in those parliamentary elections, there was a lot of votes was stolen, and people are tortured and arrested. And from that day on, the government took the power by force, and that was really the big mistake was done in the principle of democracy.
What do you hope to achieve by coming down here today protesting?
What we're processing today is we want the Canadian government, as Canada stands for democracy and human rights, and the country I love, Canada, at the same time my origin from Ethiopia, the Canadian government to help us to ask questions and to ask the current government to release prisoners of conscience, political prisoners. Politics is not, political view is not a crime. So that's what we try to do here.
Rigging elections, fraud, intimidation, and violence were rampant, according to sources in the opposition parties. Protests began on September 3rd with a peaceful demonstration by cab drivers who honked their horns in a show of support for the opposition. As a result, police arrested 30 drivers. This may have been the reason protests have turned into confrontations between police and protesters.